welcome into the Hoist the Colors podcast, the Bucks on the Pond podcast, as Scott came up with. And a few weeks ago, I don't even know if we've officially rolled with that, Scott, but that's what I guess we're going to use it as a secondary name for now, and then we got to rebrand this offseason. But it's good to be back, guys. Steve and I go with you, host of the podcast, joined by Scott Lower-Batcher, Jonathan Wagner. Jonathan is multitasking. He's watching the Carolina Hurricanes play the Islanders, so if he zones out, we'll forgive him. He's a big Canes guy. So before we get into bashing Cincinnati, bashing umpires, and bashing collegiate baseball, and talking ECU baseball, how are the Canes doing, Wags?
It has been a good start. They're up 2-1 right now in the second intermission, so we get to start the show with a little bit of a break. But the Canes have played well, good start, and the refs are definitely on the Canes side early on, which is always good and not always the case. So, yeah, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. MLB, the Reds will try not to get walked off tonight live on the air. Things are looking pretty good there, right, Scott?
We're doing the best we can. Hunter Green left the game in the third inning, so with every good thing that happens for the Reds, we have to take a lump with it. So we'll keep it going as long as we can.
Speaking of shitty Cincinnati baseball teams, let's all right, we got to talk about no disrespect to the Bearcats, but Scott Guggens has brought in some pretty good teams to Clark LeClaire Stadium in the past, but they looked awful this weekend. And look, I know by saying this, people are going to be like, well, the Pirates got to go to Ohio. They got to play Cincinnati 3 more times. And I'm not saying Cincinnati can't beat ECU, because they certainly can. It'll be on the road. It's baseball. But we've talked about, guys, how bad this conference is, and we'll get into ECU here in a minute. But I want to start with just I don't know what Cincinnati was trying to accomplish this weekend. Like, I remember some of their arms last year were pretty decent, and all of a sudden this Jackson Murphy guy comes out of the bullpen throwing like 83 miles an hour as a sidewinder. Their defense was bad. They couldn't throw strikes. Their hitting is okay, but home run or bust, it seems like, to a lot of teams. So credit to ECU for beating them all 3 games. Scott, we'll start with you because I know you're a Cincinnati guy through and through. So how can you defend the Bearcats this weekend?
I won't even try. I think you could. In all honesty, though, I think there may be a cultural problem in Cincinnati. If you look at some of their issues, in game 2, how many times did runners advance bases or even almost score because they're just lobbing the ball around the infield? That's just a lack of, focus and, accountability being had within that team to say, you know what, once that happens, it shouldn't happen again. And for it to happen multiple times in a single game is really kind of, embarrassing for them. And I would hope that, in the future, that's not something that they have to deal with. And I don't know much about Guggens. I know he did get fired up at one point this weekend, but, maybe he can change that culture. I know they had their best player leave in the transfer portal and end up at Tennessee, which has to be tough too. So, they're going to the Big 12 where they're going to be playing really, really good teams every week. So they better get it turned around fast or they're going to be in a world of hurt next season.
As always, leave your comments, questions. We already got a few checking in, watching the Hurricanes game, and as Jonathan is as well, as he's multitasking. Leave your comments and questions. We'll get to them throughout the show. Like, subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, share us on Facebook. Just continue to get those numbers up. The interest continues to grow in ECU baseball. As the season goes on, the Pirates are up to number 7 nationally in D1 baseball. I guess ranked as high as 6 according to the National Collegiate Baseball Writers Poll. One poll that shall go nameless ranks ECU 14th. What the hell are they doing out there, Wags?
If you look at it, I know Scott looks at it a lot. I know I look at it a lot. Just college baseball as a whole, top 25 as a whole. There's no explanation whatsoever for ECU really being outside of the top 10 right now, let alone down at 14. And I can't even come up with a reasonable, reason for why collegiate baseball just sucks as much as they do. But I mean, here we are. We have the same conversation every single year, and I think it gets worse. And I don't see ECU at 14. I don't think there's an argument, not with how they played lately. So I don't understand. I don't think anybody understands that really tries to. And I don't think there's any way to really back it.
So here's the big question, guys, and good luck answering this. What entity or which person or what collective unit had the worst performance of the weekend? Collegiate baseball, Cincinnati Bearcats baseball, or the umpiring crew that officiated the weekend series? Any clear answer there? Or is it a three-way tie?
I think there's one very, very clear answer there, and it is the first base umpire from Friday night's game. And I'm going to point to one specific example. Cincinnati's at the plate. They hit just a towering fly ball on the right field. And it looked to me, sitting on the first base side, that the ball was fair. I thought it was a home run. And cool. And, watching that, perfect spot for either the first base umpire who should make the call or the home plate umpire to at least have an idea. But when the first base umpire turned around from looking for the ball, he clearly never saw it. He didn't signal home run. He didn't signal a foul ball. He didn't signal – he literally signaled, I don't know. He turned around, put his arms like this and said, I don't know. And it's like, how the hell can you do that? You at least got to make a call. Even if you don't see it, at that point, you just got to give the benefit of the doubt. That's a home run. And at least just the fact that he turned around and said, I don't know, I could not believe it. And then he went and called Saturday's game. I watched that in the background, but I can only imagine that he just looked like he would be an awful umpire behind home plate, and I imagine he was. So, but that was just – it was baffling to me. He just literally turned around and said, I don't know if it was a home run or not. At least that's what the indication I was given when I was sitting there in the stands. And I can't believe that's happening. It's so stupid to me. So I think that takes the cake for me.
It's bad when Coach O is ragging on not only Cincinnati but also the umpires. And I think it was Sunday's game. There was a fly ball that ended up being scored, a sac fly, where the guy caught it but dropped it on the transfer. That was the official ruling, but there was no ruling during the play. Like, it just happened. And usually, you have the umpires saying, like, no catch or, like, he's out, and then he lost it on the transfer. Instead, the umpires just sat there and didn't make a call. And then Coach O was like, how can you review a play that doesn't have a call on the field? Because then you don't know whether to uphold it or, confirm it or deny it, whatever. So, Scott, we saw a little bit of everything. And I think just shady – I don't know if shady is the right word. I guess just incompetent umpiring continues to be a theme.
For sure. Just you have to make a call. In the first game, you have a situation where the umpire just throws his hands up. In Game 3, I don't think I've ever heard Coach O go after the umpires on the radio broadcast. And I was listening to the first half of that game on the way home, and Coach O, he was just like, it's been all weekend. And he never goes into that. And if you've somehow made Coach O upset from the radio booth, then I don't know how anybody else could have a worse weekend than you.
Yeah, there's no doubt. All right, we can sit here and talk about this stuff all day, but we better talk about actual good things, and that is ECU Baseball, guys, winning 4 consecutive games this week on top of 4-0 last week, back-to-back 4-0 weeks, 8 wins in a row. They sweep the 8-game homestand. They have not lost since the Houston series. So since you guys hosted a podcast and just ripped every player on the team, the Pirates are unbeaten. So kudos to you guys for doing that. So 28-8, back in first place, 7-2 in the conference. And let's just go quickly, kind of round the table, big takeaways from this week. We'll start with Jonathan. You can go big picture, specific player, just what stood out about the Pirates win over ODU and then the sweep over Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think there were a couple things. I think, to me, the big thing was the offense. And I think this is something I have talked about before, but you can chalk it up to bad pitching, and Cincinnati's pitching was bad. But that doesn't take away that ECU still did the best with what they faced, ECU's offense. And I think that was a big takeaway this year. And really, ECU's offense has kind of come alive, and they've done it without their best hitter. Jacob Jenkins-Cowart hasn't been in the lineup. And I really think they found a nice mix in a nice order right now with, Carter Cunningham in a 2-hole has exceeded my expectations right there. I think he's really stepped up. Lane Hoover has been still red hot lately. This weekend, he made a couple great plays in left field too, and so maybe he can play the field, and that's important now. And I think pitching wise, we saw what it looks like when the starting rotation isn't perfect. Carter Spivey was close to perfect, but Trey Savage wasn't. Josh Gross wasn't, and ECU still pretty much cruised to victories in those games. And so I think it was nice to see the bullpen step up and win games, and the offense be the sole reason for victories. And again, that's excluding Carter Spivey. But really, it wasn't a perfect weekend for ECU, but they did the best with what they could. And again, we talked about it last week, but they're doing it without some important players because injuries continue to pile up. And I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing all around. And once this team does get healthy, I think the peak is still something we haven't seen yet.
Scott, any extra thoughts there, echoing anything Wag said?
Sure. You look at it over those 4 games, we trailed for just half an inning. I think that's a big deal. Then Cincinnati starters, we only allowed them to go 7 2/3. For some context, Carter Spivey went 7 by himself, and it only took him 83 pitches. So, just an all-around great week. Obviously, when Savage and Gross don't have their best stuff and the offense steps up, they scored 39 runs in 4 games and didn't play, 7.5 innings or 7 half innings because of run rules or, just being in the lead at the end of the game. So, just an offensive explosion. The bats are starting to come around at the right time. We're about to go on the road for maybe the toughest 5-game stretch that we have this season. And, it looks like as a team, we're really hitting our stride.
Yeah, just a phenomenal thing as far as the offense getting going. And that was kind of my biggest takeaway as you guys hit on it. But the starting pitching, we've talked about it all year, maybe not necessarily being as dominant as it has been. And really it didn't matter because ECU's offense was electric. And, I don't know if it's Scott or Wags or both of you guys, but y'all have kind of talked about when the weather heats up, the Pirate bats get going, the ball starts flying out of the yard. Clark LeClaire Stadium plays much different when warm weather, typically the wind blowing out. We saw 4 consecutive multi-home run games this week by ECU. Many of those left-handed hitters hit the ball out to right field. So we're starting to see the power. The team continues to get on base at a high rate, which has been a strength for the team all year. Many of their losses, they just haven't gotten the big clutch hit or the extra base hits. And now that that's coming, you're seeing runs in bunches. So the other big takeaway for me was Danny Bill. He continues to be a guy that's emerging out of the bullpen, and the development of his changeup against the lefty-heavy ODU lineup, I thought was one of the biggest positives of the week, because usually he's more of a right-on-right, sidewinding guy. He was coming over the top and just had a nasty changeup going. So I don't know if ODU just didn't have that in the scouting report, but either way, they couldn't hit it. So a lot of positives. I mean, anytime you're winning 8 in a row, major positives throughout the week. All right, before we get to the questions, let's talk about kind of the theme of this podcast. And obviously, huge success at home. ECU is 24-2 at home. There's only 2 losses coming to Long Beach State and UNCW, which, by the way, the Seahawks winning a road series at TCU this past weekend. So they seem to be pretty damn legit. 4-5 guys in true road games, 0-1 in neutral games, according to the website I'm looking at now. I'm still confused over whether or not Queens was away or neutral, but either way. So what's it going to take for this club to put it together on the road? And I think, look, if they continue to dominate at home, they could host a regional, but if they want to be a top 8 seed, they have to find a way to win some key series on the road, win some key games on the road. So, Jonathan, is there any key you can point to where the Pirates have to play better at, especially coming up with a tough stretch this week at Charlotte and then at Wichita State?
Yeah, to me, it's all about the offense. And I think it's something that we've talked about, again, really all season long. Were they midweek woes or were they road woes? And, the midweek curse has kind of gone away. And at least over the past couple of weeks, both have been at home. And now you put it to the test again. Is it road troubles? And that's something that personally I've been concerned about all season long. And to me, I think it's all about the offense. I think to me, it's either the offense comes out very aggressive and it just doesn't work, or they honestly just like lost sometimes at the plate on the road. Again, we haven't seen that in a couple of weeks. We've gotten used to playing at home again, which is nice. But now they need to come out and just do exactly what they've been doing the past 2 weeks. First inning, second inning, don't wait, because especially when you're on the road, when you wait until the 5th, 6th, 7th, or even later to start getting guys on, piecing stuff together and scoring runs, a lot of times it's going to be too late, too little, too late. And to me, you can't afford that, especially not against, Charlotte's a quality team, maybe not as good as they were earlier in the year, but Charlotte's one of those teams, if you come around and your offense doesn't jump out early, you might lose. And I think Wichita State is similar. Right? Wichita State isn't great. Nobody in the American is great. But when you're on the road, you can't afford to have large deficits early on in the game. And I think that's the biggest key to me. Prove to me you can hit on the road, get off the bus, hit first inning, second inning, just like you do so many times at home. Because if you do, then, again, I think this team's ceiling is very high.
Yeah, the early offense will go a long way towards maybe relaxing the ECU a little bit on the road. And they were not good offensively at Houston. They definitely weren't good defensively at Houston, Scott. And look, another turf field coming up at Wichita State. The good news is the Charlotte game it looks like it'll be natural grass, but still on the road. Charlotte's already beat South Carolina in that stadium this year, so they'll come in confident. What stands out about to you about this team needing to win some road games?
Yeah, that's what I was going to go with, the defense being the key, because I think when you give teams extra outs at home, they tend to make you pay. And quite frankly, in the Houston game, the defense wasn't up to the standard that has been set, in this program over the last 5 or 6 years of really how good of defense we play. One good thing, I think, is that Lane Hoover in center field has really come on and solidified that spot as someone who can make a play and read a ball and not let anything drop in that shouldn't drop in. He made some really good reads on balls this weekend. Look to see him do that again against Wichita State and Charlotte. But yeah, we don't want to give guys extra outs. And if we can get an early lead, I think we can build on that. And then obviously starting pitching is always important. It doesn't matter what time of the year it is. If Savage goes out and gives you 7 solid innings, you're going to have a chance to win no matter where the game is. Same thing with Groves and Spivey. So, playing good defense behind those guys and not putting extra work on our arms so that our starters can go deeper, and so that by Sunday our bullpen depth is where we really like it to be. I think it's going to go a really long way to a 3-1 or 4-0 week this week.
All right, we'll circle back at the end of the show. We'll talk a little bit more about Charlotte and Wichita State and kind of what the week holds. Will we predict another 4-0 week? I don't know. I've called it twice in a row, guys. I don't know if I can go 4-0 again with it all being road games. I think. All right, we'll get into it later. All right. I don't want to get too off topic. All right, let's get into these comments. You guys have been waiting patiently, and let's dive into it. Chris Allen wants to know, Kendall Rogers answered my question on the D1 baseball chat today. He says if our RPI stays in the 8 to 10 range, we will absolutely be a top 8 seed again. Thoughts? I'll start this one just by saying, I agree, because I think for ECU to stay in that range, they're going to have to not run the table, but play extremely dominant baseball, win the regular season, probably win the conference tournament, at least make it deep into the conference tournament. I do think with last year's showing on national TV, and I know this is not last year, but I do think the way ECU, the brand, elevated itself last year in the Texas Super Regional is going to make the committee lean towards giving ECU a national seed again if they are on that bubble. So, any extra thoughts there, guys, on Chris's comment?
Yeah, I think you're right as far as what we need to do to stay in the top 8 to 10 range. I think that starts really this weekend. If we go to Wichita State and lose 2 out of 3, it's going to be hard to stay there. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't guarantee anything. If we're number 10 and Coastal's 9 like they are now, NC State's 8, are they going to put 3 teams in the top 8 that are all in the same general area, or 4 really, because Wake Forest is there too? It's hard to say. So right now, looking outside of the top 10, you have a Stanford program at 13 that tends to host Super Regionals too. And is going to get the benefit of the doubt because there's not that many good West Coast programs. They're probably the best name on the West Coast too. So, if I would say 6 to 8 range, I would feel really comfortable about being a top 8. I don't know about 8 to 10 because I think if you get into that 10 spot, it can kind of get hairy, just with all the good teams in our area. And maybe they don't want to have 5 teams in the Carolinas all hosting, or 3 or 4 hosting or being in the top 8.
The bottom line for me is I don't know what the committee's going to do, because there's one year ECU had an RPI of 5 and ended up seeded 11, 12, 13 in that range. So you never know what metric they're going to use. Jonathan, anything else to add here from your perspective?
Yeah, I think a lot of it really, I do think, is going to just depend on how other teams do, because obviously we talked about it last week, but I think there's probably a clear top 6 or 7, probably a clear top 6 right now in college baseball. And a lot of those teams are from the SEC, which means a lot of those teams are going to play each other over the final weeks. So if those teams beat up on each other and, say, LSU and Vanderbilt, for example, just kind of run the table in the SEC and just continue winning every series they play, then I think ECU has a good shot, because of teams like South Carolina and the teams like Arkansas, or they might not be up there just because the SEC is so good at the top. So, but if it's even throughout, and I know some of those teams have played each other already, but if some of those teams it's even, it's 2-1 series throughout, it's a close game, then it's going to be tougher because there's not going to be as much of a drop off between the top end and the bottom end there. But I mean, just for fun, I did a whole field of 64 projection actually this morning, and it was my first time ever doing it. So it was just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. As of right now, I have ECU at the 7, but I do think it's just ECU does have to play nearly perfect, and I think that's a lot of pressure. Not that they're looking at it that way, but you have to be nearly perfect to do that, and it's tough to be perfect in baseball, especially with injuries and all that stuff that we've already seen play a factor. So I don't know. It's going to be tough, but if your RPI stays up there, then like Scott said, I think the 6 to 8 range, I feel a lot more comfortable. But just got to go out there and win, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, it's just you look at the opponents left, it's hard to see the RPI rising that much more. You guys mentioned the margin of error is so thin. And really, the Houston series kind of cost ECU, and ECU was able to respond to that with an 8-game winning streak. But you're just not going to be able to do that every time if you slip up. If you lose another series at Wichita or whatever, it's not going to be it's not going to be easy to overcome. Skull says, I'm predicting a 10 seed. Don't see how they can stay in the top 8 with the amount of bad opponents left. And it's a fair point. It's just you're going to have to win every series most likely, and then find a way to make a run in the conference tournament. Realistically, you're going to have to win the regular season and the conference tournament, more than likely, unless you just have a dominant, just stretch here of the regular season. Skull adds ECU was literally perfect for 20 games in the year and still got an 8 seed. Well, yeah, but they were also just terrible. Not terrible, but they weren't where they are now. So if ECU reeled off 20 in a row now, I think they would be even higher than an 8. So – there's multiple ways to look at it, but we'll see. how it unfolds, starting with Wednesday at Charlotte. All right, Skull Pirate again, our favorite guy. He says, "Who is the likely 2 seed in the Greenville Regional?" Question mark. Charlotte. I don't even know if Charlotte's in the field. Were they in your field of 64 today? I mean, they got an RPI of 52.
If they were one of the last teams in. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I had Duke as the 2 seed in the Greenville Regional. And I mean, Duke's a team, they're playing some very good baseball right now. And again, like Jackson said, Tennessee or Duke. Tennessee is another team that could. Tennessee is out of the top 25, at least in the D1 baseball rankings. Tennessee is not hosting if the season ended today. Duke's not hosting, but Duke's a very good team. Both tough 2s, and I think I've just accepted the fact that we're going to get a tough 2 like that. So those 2 would make a lot of sense, Tennessee or Duke.
Yeah. I think you could throw UNC in there too. After this past weekend, they stumbled against Miami. They have a lot of tough series left as well. Maybe even NC State could play their way back into that 2 seed range. You know, their RPI is, I think, 10 or 8 right now, something like that. So, you know, I think that they at this point in the season would likely be in. I don't know if they would be a 2 or not. But I think right now, I think we would be facing Tennessee, Duke, UNC, NC State, somebody like that. If South Carolina stumbles down the stretch, I know they had a tough weekend this past weekend, and they have a lot of good teams left on their schedule. So, you know, I would hope we would avoid them, and I wouldn't rule out Campbell either. You know, who knows how the committee will view their schedule, and you know, we could end up with a 2 of Campbell and a 3 of, you know, Duke or NC State if they have some slip ups going forward, which would end up being a pretty good regional, I would think.
Yeah, I think Campbell down to 31 in the RPI. You want to talk about RPI killers? Their conference. I mean, you lose one game and you're screwed. So, and again, this is assuming ECU even hosts a regional, which is far from a slam dunk. If they go out and lose this, you know, if they go 1-3 this week, they're on the bubble to host. So, definitely a long way to go before that happens. All right, TJ Dunn's got a question here. For someone new to ECU baseball, can anyone explain how the regionals and seedings work in the college baseball postseason? So years ago, it used to be basically they would seed the top 8, and then they would seed the next 8 hosts based off regions. And that changed maybe a handful of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, to where they're supposed to seed the field 1 through 64 essentially, but definitely seed the host 1 through 16. 1 is paired with 16, 2 with 15, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how the seedings work. And it used to be they didn't want to have too many of the same teams in the same region hosting, but that's supposed to be out the window now. I don't know if that's actually going to play out that way. Am I missing anything, guys, with the explanation there?
No, it used to be the top 8 were all national seeds, but now the top 16 are all the national seeds, and then the 8 also get to host in the supers, and then no 2 teams from the same conference will be in the same regional. That's the only other little tidbit that would be in there.
And then you got the scenario if, you know, 8 and 9, the national seeds are matched up. If both the top hosts lose, you know, you could have a scenario where each 2 seed wins and they have to figure out what team is going to host the next round. So there's some, you know, bidding scenarios that go into play there. But that's rare for the most part, but it certainly has happened. Unfortunately for ECU, it seems like every time they win a regional, they're matched up with a national seed. So that has not happened yet for the Pirates on the other end, at least. All right. Skull says at least IGO doesn't have a crooked backdrop tonight. Yeah. So the studio is undergoing renovations. Big news on the way. Got a big backdrop coming, so stay tuned for that. We'll see what happens. Chris says, when is JJC back? Well, as far as I know, he is. Let's see. He got injured. Was it Thursday against UCF or Friday?
It was game 2 Thursday.
Okay.
That was a doubleheader day. So
he ruptured his testicle Thursday, and then he had surgery that night. From that point forward, it was 2 weeks of no running, from my understanding. And It's been over a week. This Thursday would be the point he could return to running, but I would not expect him to immediately just go out and run to right field and play in a live baseball game. So he may make the trip to Wichita, may play. I would personally lean towards it happening maybe next week, maybe the Tulane series. It's just, listen, I've never dealt with an injury like that. I don't know if y'all have any insight here. When do y'all expect to see him?
I'd be surprised if he played this weekend. I'd be surprised if he traveled and it was even a chance, personally. But again, like I don't know. I keep looking back at the Wyatt Langford injury at Florida. He had the same thing, ruptured testicle. He missed 15 days, and he's been back pretty much in full force ever since. I don't know if he's split time at DH, but I would just, it would make a lot of sense if JJC started off at DH when he came back, probably not playing the outfield. You would think ease him back in. There's no reason to just throw him back to the Wolves and say, go for it. You're playing every day in right field, no matter what. Ease him back in because his health long-term is not worth risking. So I think, I agree. Hopefully Tulane series, maybe midweek next week, but I think in the end, I think it's going to be a pain tolerance thing, and what he can do, he'll do, and just hope he doesn't push himself too fast. And I know the team won't do that, but hopefully soon, because it'll be a nice boost once he can get back.
For sure. I need to tag in Mrs. Lorbatcher here, who is a nurse practitioner in urology and has helped people through this particular injury in the past, and would know a lot more about it than I would. But I don't think there's a way for him. Obviously there's the no running, but I don't know if that you can potentially re-injure this part of your body. But I would look, maybe a pinch hit situation or a DH role early on, and then maybe by NC State, but definitely by Tulane. I think we'll see him back, and hopefully can DH him against Tulane and ease him back in.
So your wife works in urology. We should really have her on the show to break this thing down, man.
I think she is keeping my daughter from running into my office right now, so she's already helping out.
We'll get her on maybe to interview JC about his return, what he's been through.
By the way, Kevlar Cup was her suggestion.
Fair enough. We'll pass that along to Jacob. So while we're on the topic of outfielders, guys, we saw Luke Nowak return to the actual outfield, and he played left field. He had been playing right field. He looked a lot more comfortable in left this week. Was it the ODU game? He made that insane running catch. That was an awesome play in foul territory. So with him there, you got Claunch able to DH. He hits a couple of home runs this week. So we've kind of talked about it with Nowak, but if he can play in the field, I just feel like it gives you so much more versatility offensively. If you have to lock him into that DH spot, it's not ideal maybe to have another slugger on the bench instead of in that DH spot. Just thoughts there, Scott, with Claunch getting some ABs and making the most of it, and Nowak playing the field.
Yeah. As far as Nowak goes, he looked much more comfortable in left field than right field. Some guys are just more comfortable going glove side than they are, the other way. But yeah, and it was a little bit hard to see that play actually on the TV broadcast. But from all accounts, it sounds like it was a great play. I watched it 4 times and I was like, I don't really know what happened, but the crowd went wild. So that's all you really need to know. And obviously we're all big Claunch guys. Hit 2 of his 3 home runs this season this week. So would like to see him get as many at bats as possible so we can sound the feasting Claunch and enjoy balls flying over the fence. Do I need to break it back out?
Yeah. I mean, he hit 2 home runs this week. You need to start blowing into it.
Ooh.
Nicely done. I'm definitely making that into a GIF or something.
The background on your phone.
Wags, I know you're a Claunch guy, as clearly Scott is, and clearly I am. Not quite to the degree Scott is, but big weekend for Claunch. That was awesome to see, right?
Yeah, it was big, and I'm a big Claunch guy. I think I've been talking to you, Igo, pretty much since Claunch got to campus that he needs to be in the lineup, and I've been a pretty hard advocate for him. And it was nice to see him not only get an opportunity, but get multiple opportunities this week. You know, Cliff Godwin pretty much stuck with the same lineup this weekend, all 3 games, and I was very surprised by that, but I wasn't mad. And yeah, it speaks volumes just to what that versatility in the outfield can do. Hoover can play left field, right field, center field. Nowak is probably a left fielder or DH at this point, but you know, his ability to play left field does open up that spot. You know, whether it's one of the catchers, assuming they're both healthy, you know, in that spot, whether it's JJC when he gets back, it gives you so many options. And seeing Cam Clonch, you know, get his opportunities and coming through in big spots too. That 3-run homer early in the first game was just big. It really set the tone right away. And I think it's nice to see him get, you know, like I said, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Cam Clonch is in the lineup because I think it's tough to kind of build momentum as a hitter when you're only getting an at-bat a week, a couple at-bats a week, or they're coming on, say, Tuesday and a Sunday. It's nearly impossible. So I think to see him do that and take advantage of the opportunity and come up big, and Cam Clonch too, I spoke about versatility. Great defender. He could play first base if you need him. He could play outfield. So it was nice to see, and you never know who you're going to need to step up. We've seen JJC. We've seen other guys get injured. So just having Cam Clonch a little more comfortable at the plate and doing what he did this weekend is nothing but positive for this team.
Yeah, Cam Clonch right now with the 3rd highest OPS on the team. And that Dixon Williams is actually first. So if you take away Dixon, who only has 5 at-bats, he's second behind only Josh Moylan with an OPS over 1,000. He's hit 3 homers, 5 doubles. He's only struck out 10 times compared to 8 walks and 5 hit by pitches. So when he's getting playing time, guys, he's making the most of it. And I think you got to try to find his way into the lineup as much as possible. And just happy for him because he's kind of stuck it out. Has been a part-time player. It still kind of is, but I think can be a guy who plays a key role down the stretch here. All right, Skull again coming in hot with questions. He says, will Trey Savage have a better year next year than Gavin Williams last year? Well, first off, Gavin Williams, that was 21, right? So he's already going to have a better year than
Hey, I don't know. Gavin Williams was pretty good in the minors last year.
Yeah, that's true. He was pretty good. So, I mean, I don't know how to. What is this question, Skull? What are we doing here? Like,
you know, I'll take this.
Yeah, go ahead. I can't.
I've had something with you, Savage, that I have wanted to talk about, and I'm interested to see how he kind of holds up over the course of the season. And I can't remember if we talked about it before on this show, but, you know, this is the most that Trey Savage has thrown. And he's thrown 100 pitches an outing for the most part, going 6-7 innings, and there's still a couple months left. So I'm interested to see, you know, how he holds up and, you know, can he keep throwing 100 pitches an outing and pitch every week, every Friday night for the rest of the season? Or, you know, does he kind of fall off? I do believe his velocity was maybe a mile per hour down. He was more 92 to 94 on Friday this week, and nothing to be concerned about. But I'm interested to see if that's a trend that continues as the season goes on, because I do think, and it really the same thing with Josh Gross, really the same thing with Carter Spivey. It's just most any of these guys have pitched as a starting pitcher. And so I think that's another kind of underrated storyline, if you will, as the season goes on. You know, how do those arms hold up? And it just creates even more importance for the bullpen. But I'll say this, if his arm does hold up this year, he probably won't pitch in the fall next year and come back next year. Yeah, I think Trey Savage is a top 15 pick.
Yeah, I mean, and what Gavin did a couple years ago, I don't know if anybody will ever top that. I mean, he was so good. I mean, Trey has the potential to maybe match it. I don't think he can have a better year. I don't think anybody can have a better year. The thing I will say about Trey is he's putting it together quicker than Gavin did, which is promising. So going into next year, he's going to be on every scout's radar. So I do think top 15 is realistic. What about you, Scott?
For sure. I actually think that this year's Trey Savage reminds me a lot of Gavin Williams final season at ECU, where he finally developed into that, first round draft pick type pitcher. But Savage has another year left, so he's going to come in. He'll probably be on some preseason All-American teams, maybe some first team preseason All-American teams as well, and as in the country, not just the conference. But he'll be a guy that's looked at, very favorably by the draft, and if he can maintain it for 2 seasons, you can see him being, maybe even a top 10 pick, and which I think would be really great for ECU. We haven't had one since, who was our last top 10 pick? Hoffman. So
I think he's the only one.
And he was an all-time Reds legend out of the bullpen. So maybe the Reds will probably be picking in the top 10. So, maybe that'll end up with Trey coming to Cincinnati, where he's already had a lot of success.
All right. We'll just move on, but good well done. Chris Allen says, let's say ECU makes it to Omaha. Does Omaha exist afterwards? It may exist, Chris, but it will not be the same. Because all 3 of us will be there. We'll be hosting a podcast, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I'll find a way.
My wife might kill me if I leave for Nebraska.
You'll find a way. You'll find a way.
We need her urology expert in case something happens with Jacob Jenkins-Goward. All right. Bobby wants to know, why has the AAC gotten so bad the past 2 to 3 years? Hard to get respect beating a lot of really bad teams in conference play. For me, it falls down to Tulane and Houston being as bad as they are. Like, they are supposed to be historically conference championship contenders, NCAA tournament contenders, and they just haven't been those programs the past 5 years. And as a result, the league has taken a dip. Wichita State, I think when they joined the league, we kind of expected them to be NCAA tournament caliber every few years. And Memphis has somehow gotten worse since the Conference USA days. Cincinnati, honestly, until this year, has kind of punched above his weight at times, has had a decent team. But it's just been, I don't know, even UCF has underperformed relative to expectations and talent. And I don't know if it's coaching, culture, whatever, but it's just been disappointing. So any extra thoughts here, Scott?
Yeah, I think the transfer portal hasn't helped. You look at Tulane, they lost a ton of their best players to the transfer portal. Cincinnati lost the Conference Player of the Year to the transfer portal. I don't think Houston or Central Florida have those excuses. I think they just haven't recruited at the level they need to. I remember Houston a few years ago when they were, competing to win the conference, they had, first 4-round draft pick type pitching, and they don't have that anymore. Looking to next year, there's some teams coming in. UTSA coming in at 25 this week in the poll, so that'll be a team that is actually, functional, that can compete on the same level, that could potentially get a at-large type spot. Charlotte, same situation for most years. Obviously, this year they're a bit down. And then Rice has, obviously, they won a national championship. But they're kind of similar to Wichita State, where you expect them to be better. Wichita State has also won a national championship with Joey Carter, but has not really found that level of consistency. But I do think they have an administration that is going to hold them accountable until they do find it. They've had some weird stuff go on with their manager, Eric Wedge, quit during December, so that's obviously odd. And then South Florida, another team with really no excuse not to be good. Maybe they need to change their recruiting methods as well. Maybe try to get some Miami and Florida bounce backs instead of recruiting high school. The transfer portal exists both ways. And there's always guys that are looking for playing time. There's clearly a ton of talent in Florida. If Florida Gulf Coast can be in the top 25 up until this past week. So, there's teams with the ability to be good. It's just a matter of them finding that level of consistency again.
Yeah, UCF, it might be the only team that I think, I guess Houston to an extent can contend in the Big 12 right away. But Cincinnati, if they play like that, like they did this past weekend, I mean, they're not gonna win a game in the Big 12. I mean, they're
not gonna be close in the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's going to be a rude awakening. So yeah, I don't know. I am excited about next year. I think FAU, UTSA. I think teams like Rice, like Wichita, like Tulane, like they can't be bad forever. So I feel like the next version of the American will be better. It's just how quickly does it happen? I don't know. Skull adds ECU does have a huge advantage in the conference standings, getting to play Cincinnati 6 times. So let's talk about the conference standings, guys, as I try to pull it up here on the fly. And all right, here we go. So 3 weekends in, East Carolina has a 7-2 record. They have overcome the series loss to Houston, at least for now. Houston does have the tiebreaker. Houston 6-3, a game back. Wichita State and South Florida are 5-4, 2 games back of ECU. Tulane is 4-5, 3 games back. UCF, Memphis, and Cincinnati tied for last at 4 games behind the Pirates. Early thoughts on how the standings are shaking up, and this Wichita State series clearly a pretty important series early on, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Houston 3-3 or Houston 6-3, I didn't expect that going into it. And obviously beating ECU in the opening series was big. But yeah, this Wichita State series it's huge. I mean, 5-4, Wichita State, they do have a couple pieces. Their team as a whole might not be great when you look at it on paper, but I think they have a guy with 17 homers. They have one of the best two-way players in the country. So, they're not a bad team by any means, even though, they're 20-15 overall, 5-4 in the American. So, I mean, that's not bad. And yeah, I'm going to stop here because the Canes did just win 2-1. So I just had to get that in there right there. But yeah, it's a very big weekend. And again, I think it's important that it is on the road. And I'm not going to try to make the case for Wichita State being a good team in relation to, what other teams might be playing against. But it's a road team against right now the third best team in the American. So ECU needs to go handle their business. And if they come out slow again against a team like Wichita State, they will lose. So, but the race is important. And South Florida, 5-4, I think they're capable of kind of turning things on as the season goes. Tulane, I don't. I'm just not even going to talk about them. UCF, we've seen. Cincinnati, we've seen. Memphis, I also don't think they're really capable of doing much. But I think it's ECU, Houston, Wichita, and maybe South Florida. So staying at the top is important, and you have to get off to a good start doing that this weekend.
Don't Wichita and Houston play each other 6 times?
Yes.
So that could play a role.
For sure.
They could beat each other up. Any thoughts, Scott?
Sure. If we go to Wichita and get a sweep, then we have a 5-game lead on the team that's currently in third place. I would say that pretty much eliminates them, 3 conference weekends into the season, or 4, I guess, now. But you look at last year, I think Tulane was our 3rd or 4th series, and everybody was kind of bunched up at the top, and then Tulane took 2 or 3 from us, and then we pulled away and we won by 6 or 7 games. So tough to say, based on the standings right now, how things will get shake out. But yeah, I don't know that we have an advantage by playing Cincinnati twice. When you look at it, Central Florida plays USF, who's a RPI 200 team twice. Memphis plays Tulane, who is a really bad team this year. They play them 6 times. The only ones I think they have any real gripe are Houston and Wichita, because they're probably the 2nd, 3rd best teams in the conference, and they play each other. But that's just how it shakes out sometimes. I don't know that right now, I don't know that Wichita is so far above anybody else in the league that it's unfair for Houston. And obviously, if Wichita takes 2 out of 3 from us, then they're in the same spot that Houston was, having played us and getting to play them twice. So, yeah, I don't know that it's a huge advantage, because we also have to go to Ohio every year to play Cincinnati. So that's not all. Sometimes we do that early in the year and it can be cold. So
I don't know about you guys, but I'm really going to miss this traveling Cincinnati series. All right. Jared, Jared Plummer from the Left Field Megaphones crew wants to know, assuming ECU hosts, if you are an ECU administrator, do you add stands to try to get more people into Clark LeClaire Stadium, or have it stay the way that it is or that it has? This is I feel like every few weeks, guys, we've discussed potential expansion or just something because we've talked about it. The jungle has just become not a nightmare, but it's become a different animal in terms of trying to attend games out there. And if you put it with another regional host, given the attention this team is getting, given the success, the season tickets where they are, it's going to be a hot ticket. And I don't want to say it's going to be a frustrating ticket, but maybe in some cases it will be, just because it can be not very comfortable out there if you're not made for the jungle. So I don't know. I mean, I go back and forth on this. I've talked to some administrators. They've said temporary bleachers down the first base line in that little gap between the hitting facility and where the stadium ends, or the grandstands, there's just too many obstructed views there to where they don't want to build that temporary bleacher, give out tickets, and then have complaints about it. So outside of that, I don't really see another area because they have the tent set up for the players and for the hospitality area down the third base line. I don't know if you could put bleachers in the jungle. So maybe there's a creative workaround, but I feel like it's kind of a scenario where I don't know. I just don't know what you can do. Thoughts?
Yeah, and I think it's tough to do something like that, going from regular season into postseason too. I think that's something, if you're going to do it, you probably roll it out when it's over the course of a whole season. But yeah, and Skull Pirate just said this in the comments, but I do think you have to keep the charm of the jungle. Say what you want about it, but that's what makes the ECU atmosphere great. We saw that last season. And yeah, it could make sense to, maybe put bleachers out in right field. But again, I don't think you can do that in the middle of the season going into the postseason. And plus, we saw what it's like when you don't do that last year. And what I mean by that, it was one hell of an atmosphere, and it was jam-packed in there. Sure, some people might not have the best view, but in the end, who cares? There are going to be a ton of people out there regardless. And honestly, in a way, it might take away from some of that. So I agree. I don't think there's much you can do. It's unfortunate because I do wish we could get more people in, officially. Obviously, we saw more people last year than what the official numbers probably were. But it's unfortunate, but I just don't think there's a whole lot you can do with the current makeup of the stadium.
Scott, do they have to figure out the chair situation at least, or do something about that, or just not? Do they just not do anything?
First thing they should do is take the Taco Bell sign and just throw it into the parking lot somewhere. That they're upset about selling obstructive view tickets in that little gap, but if you're behind the Taco Bell sign, you also can't see anything. So let's get rid of the Taco Bell sign, or just tape it to the practice field fence, or maybe move the practice field fence back 25 feet for the super regionals and throw some temporary bleachers up there or something like that. That might work. But yeah, the jungle has its charm. There's people who get there early. They do put their chairs out early. I don't have a problem with that on game day, but I think if you bring it in, you should take it out. I know during the rain delay, there were a lot of just chairs that were broken and wet and soaked through, and it's just 3 days of sitting in it, getting rained on, sitting in it, getting rained on. So that makes it really tough. Just my personal opinion. Nobody throw rocks at me, but I think if you bring something into the stadium, you should take it back out with you, or throw it in the trash can on your way out. And obviously this year, I think they've had some issues with alcohol being brought in that was not purchased within the stadium. So they've had to do a little bit more checking there. So I feel like during the regionals, maybe even a super regional, they'll be more focused on making sure you have an actual ticket to get into the game. So if we can get more seats in there where we can sell more tickets, I think that's a good thing. Honestly, I would sit in an obstructed view seat if it meant that I got to go to the game and enjoy it and didn't have to worry about trying to to find a ticket somewhere. So, yeah, I do think that the chair thing is something to be addressed. I don't know if this year's the right year or not, but at some point it's got to be done.
It's getting late when Buck Wild was entered the chat. We got some real golden comments here.
It's a real good 3 stretch there.
Yeah. Skull Pirate says you have to keep the charm of the jungle. Lucy Jones, a.k.a. Buck Wild, says blam. I guess that's him entering the chat. He says, yo quiero taco hell. I don't know if that's a typo or not.
I feel like it's not.
Yeah, probably not. And then Josh88, who also might be Buck Wild, says I watched some guy throw up in the bushes near the scoreboard during the Charlotte game in the postseason 2 years ago. All right, that's cool. Cool story, bro. All right, Brandon Carr. He says, glad you kept everything dry tonight. That is a reference to me spilling the water on my computer. Glad to know my computer still works. Scott, nice shirt as always. I just watched this for your shirts. He's wearing the Bunch of Jerks t-shirt for the Hurricanes in case you're listening to the podcast. Wags, Carr has nothing for you unless you snuck over to Chapel Hill this past weekend.
Can confirm I did not.
By the way,
that's because I'm an ECU fan.
Can y'all guess the Denver Broncos player that this shirt is referencing? It is very obscure.
Is it Russell Wilson driving a golf cart and flipping it over into a bunker?
That's a good guess.
That is a good guess. This is Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy 2 gloves. He's got the gloves, so yep. Don't ask me why I have a Teddy Bridgewater Denver Broncos.
Vikings legend Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah, it's quite sad. Anyways, apparently Alec Burleson hit a 2-run shot. So
he did.
that's a major positive. Somebody says Skull says he got sun poisoned during the Texas series and he'd do it again. Skull also says chairs shouldn't be allowed. There were tons of issues with people getting mad about people standing in front of them. It's the jungle. Get over it. Yeah, we talked about that a lot. Lucy Jones says, say what?
I kind of agree. It is standing room only seating, right? The jungle, technically. So if you allow people to bring a chair to standing room only, it does kind of not make it standing room only.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a terrible idea or something completely unjustified if you have that opinion.
Yeah. Purple Beard says, do you have the Teddy jersey for the Broncos? Absolutely not. This was a $15 shirt. I'm not spending $150 on the Teddy Bridgewater jersey. All right, last question, and then we will jump into our predictions because we're running short on time. Some of us got to get some sleep. Wags has to go celebrate the Hurricanes win. Back to baseball. Wednesday, a bullpen day considering road woes or preferred starter to get reps. So they have not announced a starter to this point. I would think it's going to be a bullpen day of some sort, although Zach Root has kind of been the midweek guy lately. And maybe you start Root again, just see how it goes, and then figure it out from there. But I don't know. I mean, crucial series at Wichita, short turnaround. I feel like you're not going to extend any of your key guys with so much.
Yeah, I agree. I think Zach Root probably gets the nod, and from there, you probably see Danny Beal, you probably see Wyatt Lunsford-Chankman, probably see Garrett Saylor, maybe Jake Hunter. It all just depends on how the game goes and what the situation is. But yeah, I don't think you start Jake Hunter because I do think he has kind of turned into a guy they value out of the bullpen on the weekend because he has been warming up a lot in those spots early and often, really, on the weekend. He did this weekend, I know. So Jake Hunter, I'm not sure if I see him starting, but I definitely see him available out of the bullpen. And it's realistically all hands on deck going from Sunday to Wednesday between games. So Monday, Tuesday off. Everybody should be available. So I think the scoreboard will probably reflect that afterwards. Or not the scoreboard, but the usage of pitchers and who plays. So, yeah, but I'd expect Root and then a whole bunch of guys after him.
Yeah, we had 4 less innings this weekend than we normally would have, so guys should be fresh. I don't think you'll see anybody throw more than 50 or so pitches.
All right, guys, it's prediction time. ECU on the road at Charlotte inside Truist Field. I know somebody asked earlier if any of us are going to Charlotte. I believe the answer is no. Correct?
Correct.
I will not be there.
We're saving our funds for Omaha.
That's right.
And Scott will pay for everybody's trip.
I'll use all of my son's daycare money on it.
All right, so Charlotte on Wednesday, RPI of 52, record of 19 and 15. They swept Rice this past weekend, so they are playing well. They have to play North Carolina on Tuesday, so they have a brutal midweek. Then on the road, I assume ECU's going straight from Charlotte out to Wichita the following day. Would make 0 sense to drive back. So out to Wichita, Kansas, 20 and 15 record, RPI of 147. The Shockers coming off, I believe, a series win over Tulane, maybe. I can't remember who they beat.
Tulane, yep.
Yep, Tulane. So RPI of 147. And ECU historically has not played well at Wichita. I think they split a 4-game series last time out there in the 2020 season and maybe won 2 or 3, but it was like pulling teeth the year before that or 2 years before that. Either way, I remember them going there and not playing well. So not going to be an easy place to play. I think they have some pretty good crowds. Prediction time, guys. What do we got as far as ECU this week record-wise? We will start with Scott Lorbatcher.
Yeah, we're still not – our road record still is what it is, which is not great. And until I see something on the road, it's going to be hard for me to predict anything that is not 2-2 for this stretch. Obviously, Charlotte has played some good teams well. So has Wichita. They beat Oklahoma State. They actually beat Oklahoma twice as well. And they won a game out against Long Beach, who beat us. They did lose that series, but they did win the Sunday game. So I hope they prove me wrong, but I'm going to go 2-2.
All right, Jonathan. First off, give us your record prediction. I don't know if you've got a special prediction this week.
I will have one from here on out. So, first record, I was going to say 2-2 as well for the same reason that Scott said. Just you have to prove it to me that you can win on the road. But once Igo mentioned that Charlotte does play on Tuesday against North Carolina, that upped me to 3-1. Because Charlotte, that's going to be a lot tougher for them. Those 2 games back to back is brutal. So I'm going to go 3-1. I think you lose one on the weekend. I'll probably say you lose Sunday against Wichita. And, yeah, do you want me to drop my bonus prediction now or do you want me to wait?
We'll circle back to you. We'll go back. I'll make my record prediction, then we'll get your bonus. So I'm going 3-1. I think ECU wins a tight one at Charlotte midweek. I think they win Friday with the Savage on the mound. I think Spivey finds a way to get it done Saturday, and then Sunday Wichita State wins. I think that they win one. Wouldn't be shocked if they push it and end up winning the series, but I feel like ECU's in the right mindset now. Cliff Godwin immediately after the Cincinnati sweep and Josh Moreland both talked about, hey, we've had success at home, but we have to take this on the road now. And at some point, this team's got to flip that switch mentally to go on the road with the same mentality or a different mentality of going on the road, but also playing the same way, getting that energy up early in games, getting the offense going. So I feel like this is the week maybe that flips and they have a good week on the road. So we'll see what happens, though. All right, back to Jonathan to wrap it up. He predicted Jacob Jenkins-Cowart would hit 3 home runs and then suffer a groin injury. He nailed that one. And then last week was Riley Johnson home run, right?
Yeah, Riley Johnson had like 2 at-bats last week, so I'm really on opposite ends of the spectrum so far.
But limited chances. You know what? I'm going to call that an incomplete. I'm not going to say that you missed there. I think he's he's dealing with an injury, so I feel like it's not fair to hold you.
And I also thought, I mentioned earlier that I was surprised that the lineup was the same all 3 games over the weekend. I figured that outfield spot especially, Nowak might get out there one game, Johnson might be out there one game. It might be 3 different outfield combinations. It wasn't. So, oh well, but we'll call it a loss, call it an incomplete, whatever. But on to this week, and I struggled a little bit with this one. And again, I'm not going to lie, I didn't start thinking about it until we started recording. It's just whatever comes to me in the moment. And I think this week I'm going to go away from the offensive side of it, and I'm going to go pitching. And I think that one of ECU's starting pitchers, and I think this will be on the weekend, so Trey Savage, Carter Spivey, or Josh Gross, one of the 3 of them will carry a no-hitter through 5 innings. So they will begin the 6th with no hits. I feel like that's a good one. I think we've seen that a couple times over the last month or two. Carter Spivey, Trey Savage, but carry a no-hitter into the 6th inning.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's a good kind of off-the-wall prediction, but reasonable, doable, but still probably unlikely. But I like that prediction. So we'll see what happens. And also, I'm still waiting for somebody to walk behind that door walk through that door behind you, Jonathan, one of these days. Like, it's going to happen during the show. Somebody's just going to walk in. And
if it does, we have problems. I live alone.
I just thought about that as you answered. Like, I was focused on the door and not you. But we'll see what happens. Guys, it's been a fun hour as always, especially when the Pirates are winning. We don't have too much to complain about. So we got to come up with other scenarios. We got to answer a bunch of BS in the comments from Lucy Jones, who's still going on about not wearing shirts. And so we're just going to get out of here while we still can. If you're listening to the podcast edition, check us out, hoistthecolors.net. Subscribe on YouTube as well so you can watch us live, comment, and join the comments section with some of these fun people. Scott, Jonathan, it's been a blast, guys.
Always.
All right, see you guys next week.
All right, for those 2, I'm Stephen Igo. This has been the Hoist the Colors podcast. We will talk to you next Monday night.